My name is Robert and I'm 63 years old. For the past 40 years, I served as a detective in the Chicago Police Department. I've seen the worst of humanity, solved hundreds of cases, and thought I'd seen every kind of evil there was. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the phone call I received on a cold November evening. It was my younger brother, Michael, calling. Michael, who used to be the life of every party. Michael, who built his own construction company from nothing and turned it into $1 million business. Michael, whose smile could light up a room. The voice on the other end of that call wasn't Michael. It was a hollow shell of the man I knew. "Robert," he whispered, and I could hear him struggling to breathe. "I need help. Please, I don't know what to do anymore." My blood ran cold. In all our 58 years together, Michael had never sounded like this. Never. "Where are you?" I demanded, already grabbing my keys. "Home. Catherine and her mother are out shopping, Robert. I'm scared. I'm so tired. I just wanted to stop." 20 minutes later, I was standing in the doorway of Michael's mansion in Neepville, a beautiful suburb west of Chicago. The house that should have been filled with warmth and laughter felt like a tomb, and when Michael opened the door, I nearly didn't recognize him. My brother had lost at least 40 lb. His once athletic frame looked skeletal. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and his hands trembled as he gestured for me to come inside. His hair, which had started going silver like mine, was now completely white. He looked 70, not 58. "My God, Michael," I breathed. "What happened to you?" He couldn't even look me in the eye. We sat in his study, a room that used to be his sanctuary, filled with his awards and photographs from better times. Now the walls looked bare. I noticed his trophies were gone. The photos of him with his business partners, with our late parents, with his friends, all removed. The only pictures remaining were of Catherine. "It started slowly," Michael began, his voice barely above a whisper after we got married 3 years ago. Little comments here and there. Catherine would say I was spending too much time at the office, that I cared more about work than her. I tried to cut back, show her she mattered. I remembered the wedding. Catherine had seemed charming, attentive, a real estate agent, successful in her own right, or so we all thought. I also remembered how quickly she'd isolated Michael from our family gatherings. How the invitations to Sunday dinners became "we can't make it. Catherine has other plans." Then her mother moved in. Michael continued, and something dark flickered across his face. "Margaret," she said, "it was temporary just until she found a new place after her divorce." That was 2 years ago. "Robert, 2 years." I leaned forward. "Tell me everything." And he did. The story that unfolded was worse than any case I'd worked on. It wasn't the dramatic violence you see in movies. It was insidious, calculated, and devastating in its cruelty. Catherine and Margaret had systematically dismantled my brother's life. They controlled every dollar he made. His paychecks were deposited into an account only Catherine could access. She gave him a small weekly allowance for lunch, barely enough for fast food. Meanwhile, she drove a new Mercedes and renovated the house twice in 3 years. They monitored his phone, his emails, his every movement. If he came home 5 minutes late, there would be hours of interrogation, accusations of infidelity, threats to leave him and take everything. Margaret would stand there nodding along, adding her own venom about how Michael was just like all men, untrustworthy and selfish. They'd poisoned his relationships with everyone. Told his business partners he was unreliable, having a breakdown. Told his employees he was planning to sell the company. Told our family he didn't want to see us. I'd believed it. God forgive me. I thought Michael was just too busy, too wrapped up in his new marriage. "I can't even eat dinner with them," Michael said, and his voice cracked. "Every meal is an interrogation. Every conversation is a trap. If I say the wrong thing, if I don't agree fast enough, if I dare to have an opinion, Catherine goes silent for days. Won't speak to me, won't look at me, and Margaret takes over, telling me how I'm destroying her daughter, how I'm a failure as a husband." He pulled up his shirt and I saw his ribs, actually counted them. This man, who used to bench press 200, looked like he'd been starved. "They control the food in the house," he said. "Say I'm getting fat, that I need to watch my weight for my health. There's never enough at meals. If I try to order takeout, they find the receipts and accuse me of wasting money. Money I earned, Robert. My own money. "Why haven't you left?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd seen this pattern in dozens of domestic abuse cases. The difference was nobody believed men could be victims, too. "She threatened to destroy me," Michael whispered. "Says she has evidence of affairs, of financial fraud, of things I never did. She'll take the company, the house, everything. Margaret has connections with lawyers, judges. They've been documenting everything, twisting everything. Last week, Catherine took photos of bruises on her arm that she got at the gym. And Margaret told me they'd say I did it. Who would believe me over them?" I felt rage building in my chest, the kind I hadn't felt since my days working homicide. But I kept my voice calm. I'd learned long ago that anger doesn't solve problems. Strategy does. "Do you trust me?" I asked. Michael looked up, and for the first time in the conversation, I saw a spark of hope in his eyes. "With my life." "Good, because I have a plan." Growing up, people often mistook Michael and me for twins. We weren't, but we looked remarkably similar. Same height, same build before he'd lost the weight. Same silver hair, same blue eyes, the same strong jaw we'd inherited from our father. Even our voices were similar. I'd once answered his phone by accident, and his secretary hadn't realized it wasn't Michael until I mentioned something she knew he wouldn't know. That similarity was about to become Catherine's worst nightmare. Over the next week, I prepared. I'd taken early retirement 2 years ago, so my time was my own. I called in favors from former colleagues who owed me. I hired a private investigator I'd worked with for years, a woman named Rita, who could find dirt on anyone, and I talked to Michael every day, learning everything about his daily routine, his mannerisms, the way he interacted with Catherine and Margaret. Rita worked fast. Within 3 days, she'd uncovered something beautiful. Catherine wasn't a successful real estate agent. She was an average one at best, and half her sales were properties that Michael had bought through his construction company connections and let her list. The Mercedes leased in Michael's name. The renovations paid for by siphoning money from Michael's business accounts in small amounts that wouldn't trigger immediate attention. And Margaret, she wasn't divorced. She was wanted in Arizona for fraud. She'd run a scheme selling fake timeshares before fleeing the state. There was an active warrant. "Jackpot," Rita said, spreading the documents across my dining room table. "This is more than enough to bury them both. But I wanted more than legal justice. I wanted them to feel what they'd put Michael through. I wanted them to understand what it meant to be powerless, controlled, and afraid." The switch happened on a Monday morning. Catherine and Margaret had a girls' day planned, shopping in downtown Chicago followed by a spa appointment. They'd be gone for hours, leaving Michael alone as usual. He called me the moment their Mercedes pulled out of the driveway. I arrived 15 minutes later with 2 suitcases. In one, I'd packed clothes that matched Michael's usual style. In the other, I'd brought items he'd need for the next few weeks. "This is crazy," Michael said, but he was smiling for the first time in years. "Crazy is my specialty," I replied. "Now, let's get you out of here before you waste away to nothing." We went over the plan one more time. Michael would stay at my house completely off. No phone, no computer, no contact with anyone who might accidentally reveal he wasn't home. He'd eat real food, rest, and start seeing a therapist I'd lined up who specialized in abuse recovery. Meanwhile, I would become Michael. I'd already spent hours studying his patterns, the way he walked with a slight limp from an old construction injury, how he always touched his wedding ring when he was nervous. The fact that he said, at the end of statements when he was uncertain, the way he developed this habit of constantly apologizing, even when he'd done nothing wrong. I'd also prepared my body. Over the past week, I'd barely eaten, losing about 10 lbs. I'd studied his recent photos, noting how he held his shoulders now, slumped and defeated. How he avoided eye contact, how he made himself small, taking up as little space as possible. "You're really going to do this?" Michael asked as I changed into his clothes. "I spent 4 decades protecting people," I said, adjusting his watch on my wrist. "I'm not about to stop now, especially when it's family." We looked in the mirror together. Even Michael was startled by how similar we looked with his weight loss. We could have been the same person. "When Catherine sees you, she'll see me," he said quietly. "But you won't behave like me. What happens when she realizes? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Catherine and Margaret returned at 600, laden with shopping bags. I'd spent the afternoon exploring the house, documenting everything I found with photos on a burner phone, hidden cameras in Michael's study, a journal where Catherine had detailed her plans to manage Michael's finances, emails to Margaret discussing which of Michael's assets they'd claim in a divorce. I heard them before I saw them. Their voices carried through the house. I can't believe that sales clerk, Catherine was saying, the nerve suggesting the dress didn't fit properly. I looked perfect. You did, darling, Margaret cooed. Don't let these people with no taste get you down. Now, let's see what our little worker bee has prepared for dinner. They walked into the kitchen, where I was sitting at the table waiting. I'd positioned myself exactly where Michael said he usually sat, with my phone beside me, ready to record. Catherine stopped when she saw me. Something flickered across her face. For a moment, I thought she'd realized something was wrong. But then her expression shifted into that sweet smile Michael had described, the one that didn't reach her eyes. Michael, honey, you're home early, she said. I thought you had a site inspection until 7 p.m. Finished early, I replied, matching Michael's tired tone. Well, aren't you going to ask about our day? Margaret said, dropping her bags on the counter with a loud thump. This was one of their games. Michael had warned me. They'd talk for hours about their activities, and he was expected to listen, nod, and express enthusiasm. If he showed any sign of boredom or tried to change the subject, there would be consequences. I looked up at them and said something Michael would never say. No. The word hung in the air. Catherine blinked. Margaret's mouth opened slightly. Excuse me, Catherine said, her voice taking on an edge. I said no, I repeated, keeping my tone neutral. I don't want to hear about your shopping trip. I had a long day, and I'd like some peace. I could see the rage building in Catherine's face, the mask slipping. This was a woman used to total control, and I'd just challenged it. Margaret's expression was pure calculation, already planning her response. That's very rude, Michael, Margaret said coldly. We spent the day thinking of you, and this is how you thank us. I stood up, and I made sure to stand at my full height, not the slumped posture Michael had adopted. Both women took an unconscious step back. Speaking of spending, I said calmly, I checked our bank accounts today. Interesting pattern, I noticed. Thousands of dollars going out every month. But I can't seem to find receipts or explanations for most of it. Catherine's face went white. You have no right to look at those accounts without asking me first. I manage the finances because you're terrible with money. Am I? I ask. Because I built $1 million company from nothing. I think I understand money just fine. What I don't understand is why my credit cards are maxed out when I barely use them, or why there's a lease for a Mercedes in my name that I don't remember signing. How dare you? Margaret started, but I cut her off. I'm not finished, I said, and my voice carried the authority of 4 decades in law enforcement. Sit down, both of you. We need to have a conversation. For the first time in 3 years, they obeyed. They sat at the kitchen table, and I could see confusion mixed with anger on their faces. This wasn't the broken man they'd spent years creating. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to answer them truthfully, and we're going to figure out where we go from here. You can't speak to us like this, Catherine hissed. I'm your wife. Yes, I said. And a wife should be a partner, not a prison warden. When did you start timing my movements? Was it before or after you installed tracking software on my phone? Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected me to know about that. I needed to know you were safe, she said, but her voice wavered. Seth, I repeated. Is that why you tell my employees I'm having a breakdown? Why you cancel my meetings without telling me? Why you've spent 3 years destroying every relationship I have outside this house? That's not true, Margaret interjected. You're paranoid, Michael. We've been worried about your mental health for months. I turned to her and I let her see the detective I used to be, the man who'd broken hardened criminals in interrogation rooms. Margaret, I said quietly. How's Arizona this time of year? She froze. Completely froze. Her face drained of all color. I don't know what you mean, she stammered. Really? Because I have some friends in law enforcement who've been very curious about your whereabouts. Something about fraud charges. A warrant. Catherine looked at her mother confused. Mom, what is he talking about? Nothing, Margaret said quickly. He's making things up. This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I've been warning you about, Catherine. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared and slid it across the table. Inside were printouts of court documents, police reports, and photographs. Margaret's face in a mug shot, details of her time-share scheme, testimonies from victims. Is this nothing? I asked. Catherine grabbed the folder, scanning the documents. Her hands were shaking. Mom, you told me you were divorced. You said Dad left you with nothing. I can explain. Margaret started, but I interrupted. While we're sharing, Catherine, want to tell your mother about the fake property sales, or should I? Now it was Catherine's turn to go pale. You're going through my business records. That's illegal. No, I said. What's illegal is fraud. What's illegal is financial abuse. What's illegal is forging someone's signature on lease agreements. I pulled out more documents. I had a forensic accountant go through everything. Want to guess how much money you've stolen from me over 3 years? The number I stated made Margaret gasp. Catherine looked like she might be sick. This is ridiculous, Catherine said, trying to regain control. You can't prove any of this. And even if you try, I'll tell everyone about your affairs, about how you hit me, about how you're mentally unstable. The affairs that never happened, I asked. Go ahead, try it. Because I have 3 years of my location data, showing I've been exactly where I said I was. I have medical records showing I've never been violent. And I have recordings. I pulled out another phone. This one Michael had been hiding for weeks. You think I didn't document the verbal abuse, the threats, the gaslighting? I have hours of recordings, Catherine. Hours of you and your mother tearing me down, controlling every aspect of my life. I played a clip. It was from a dinner 2 weeks ago. Catherine's voice came through clearly. You're pathetic, Michael. A real man would be able to satisfy his wife. But you can't even do that, right? Sometimes I wonder why I bothered marrying you. Oh, right. For the money. Margaret's voice followed. At least his money is good for something. God knows he's useless for anything else. Catherine's face crumbled as she heard herself. That's out of context. You were being difficult that night. Was I? I asked. What did I do to deserve that? I came home on time. I brought you flowers, and you spent 2 hours telling me everything wrong with me. There's nothing out of context about cruelty. The room fell silent. Both women were calculating, trying to find a way out, a way to regain control. But I wasn't Michael anymore. I wasn't the broken man they'd created. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call your lawyer, Catherine. You're going to file for divorce. You're going to accept a reasonable settlement, nothing more than what you came into this marriage with, and you're going to do it quietly. And if I don't? Catherine challenged. Then I call my friends at the Chicago PD and the FBI. I hand over all the evidence of your fraud, your embezzlement, and your abuse. I let them handle the Arizona warrant for Margaret, and I make sure every newspaper in the state knows about it. You wouldn't, Margaret breathed. The scandal would destroy you, too. I smiled. I'm 63 years old and retired. I don't care about scandal, but you, Catherine, you're 42 with a real estate career built on lies. And you, Margaret, you're facing serious prison time. This is blackmail, Catherine spat. No, I corrected. This is consequence, something you two have never faced before. Over the next hour, they tried every manipulation tactic they'd perfected. Catherine cried, begged, promised to change. Margaret threatened, blustered, tried to turn everything back on me, but I'd seen it all before in interrogation rooms and crime scenes. I knew every trick in the book. Finally, as midnight approached, Catherine broke. Fine, I'll file for divorce, but I want the house. The house I bought before I met you, I asked. No, you'll take your clothes, your personal items, and that's all. You have 48 hours to move out. That's not enough time, she protested. Then you'd better work fast, I replied. Margaret tried one last power play. You can't kick me out. I have tenant rights. You have a warrant, I countered. Would you rather deal with me or the police? The next morning, I called Michael. It's done. Start packing. You're coming home. Did they hurt you? Was his first question. So typical of him to worry about others even now. They tried, I said. But I'm not the victim they're used to. Michael, it's over. You're free. I heard something on the other end of the line. My brother, my strong, capable brother, who'd built an empire and survived 3 years of hell, was crying. They were tears of relief, of hope, of the weight of years finally lifting. The divorce was finalized in 3 months. Catherine tried to fight it at first, but when her lawyer saw the evidence we had, he advised her to settle quickly. She walked away with her car, her personal belongings, and nothing more. The house, the business, all stayed with Michael. Margaret was arrested 2 weeks after moving out, caught trying to run another scam in Indiana. The Arizona warrant meant extradition, and last I heard, she was looking at 5 to 10 years. But the real victory wasn't legal. It was watching Michael come back to life. The first month, he barely left my house. He slept 14 hours a day, his body recovering from years of stress and malnutrition. He gained weight slowly but steadily. The color returned to his face. The tremor in his hands disappeared. The second month, he started therapy. Twice-a-week sessions where he unpacked the trauma, learned to recognize the patterns of abuse, and began to rebuild his self-worth. His therapist said he was showing signs of complex PTSD, common in long-term abuse victims. By the third month, he was ready to face his company again. His employees welcomed him back with tears and hugs. They'd known something was wrong, but hadn't known how to help. With Catherine gone, Michael flourished. Within 6 months, his company's profits increased by 30%. But the biggest change was in Michael himself. He smiled again. He laughed. He called me every Sunday just to talk like we used to before Catherine. He started dating again cautiously with firm boundaries and a much clearer understanding of what healthy relationships looked like. 1 year after that phone call, we were sitting on my back porch drinking beer and watching the sunset. Michael looked like himself again, healthy, strong, confident. "I never thanked you properly," he said suddenly. "You don't need to thank me," I replied. "You're my brother. That's what family does." "No," he insisted. "What you did, pretending to be me, facing them down, it saved my life." I was disappearing, Robert. Another year, and I don't think there would have been anything left of me to save. I thought about that, about how close we'd come to losing him, about how many others were out there suffering in silence because nobody believed men could be victims of domestic abuse. "The statistics say 1 in 4 men will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime," I said. "But only about 10% report it. You know why?" Michael shook his head. "Shame. Fear of not being believed. The idea that men should be strong enough to handle it themselves." I looked at him. "You were strong, Michael. Surviving what you went through took more strength than most people will ever need. But even the strongest people need help sometimes." "I should have called you sooner," he said quietly. "Maybe, but you called when you were ready. That's what matters." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Michael asked, "Do you think they'll ever understand what they did wrong?" I thought about Catherine, who I'd heard was struggling to maintain her real estate license after word got out about the fraud, about Margaret sitting in an Arizona prison, about how they'd both blamed everyone but themselves for their situation. "Probably not," I said honestly. "People like that rarely do. They'll always see themselves as the victims, no matter how much evidence says otherwise." "That makes me sad," Michael admitted. "Not for them exactly. Just sad that some people choose to hurt others and never learn from it." That was Michael. Even after everything, he still had empathy. That's how I knew he'd really survived with his soul intact. "You know what the hardest part was?" he asked. "Not the insults or the control or even the starvation. It was the loneliness, feeling like I was the only one going through it, like I couldn't tell anyone because who would believe me?" "I believe you," I said simply. "I know," he replied. "I know you do now. I just wish I'd trusted that sooner." If there's anything I learned from this experience, it's that abuse doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, rich or poor, strong or weak. What matters is having people who believe you, who will stand with you, who will help you find your way back to yourself. I spent 40 years as a detective solving cases, putting criminals away. But the most important case I ever worked was my brother's. Because this time it wasn't just about justice. It was about saving someone I loved, Michael is thriving now. His company is more successful than ever. He's engaged to a wonderful woman named Sarah, who treats him with respect and kindness. They're building a life together based on trust and equality, not control and fear. He still has hard days. Anniversaries of particularly bad incidents can trigger memories. He's still in therapy, working through it all, but he's healing, growing, becoming himself again. As for me, I've found a new purpose in retirement. I volunteer with a men's domestic abuse hotline. I share my brother's story with his permission to help others understand that abuse can happen to anyone. I work with police departments to train officers on recognizing the signs of abuse in male victims, because that's the thing about trauma and survival. You can let it destroy you, or you can transform it into something that helps others. Michael chose the latter. He speaks at events now, raising awareness. He donates to shelters and support programs. Last month, a young man approached him after a speaking event. He was thin, haunted-looking, with the same defeated posture Michael used to have. He said, Michael's story gave him the courage to leave his abusive wife. Michael gave him my number, told him there were people who would help, who would believe him, who would stand with him. The young man called me the next day. We made a plan, got him somewhere safe, started the process of reclaiming his life. And that's how the cycle of suffering becomes a cycle of healing. One person helps another. Who helps another? Who helps another? Each of us carrying forward the lessons we learned, the strength we found, the hope we refused to lose. My brother once thanked me for saving his life. But the truth is, he saved his own life by making that phone call, by trusting me, by choosing to survive. I just gave him the tools and support to do it. That's all any of us can do for each other. Really believe each other, support each other, stand together against the darkness, and remember that no matter how alone you feel, there's always someone ready to help if you're brave enough to ask. If you're reading this and you're in a situation like Michael was, please know it's not your fault. You deserve better. You deserve respect and kindness and love. And there are people who will believe you and help you. All you have to do is reach out, because everyone deserves to be free. Everyone deserves to be safe. Everyone deserves to reclaim their life from those who tried to take it away. And sometimes all it takes is one phone call to start the journey.